Howdy, folks.
Tomorrowland Transit Authority Metroliner non-stop now departing Rocket Tower Plaza Station for a round-trip Super Skyway tour.
Hey, y'all. Welcome to the WDW Reflections Podcast, your unofficial guide through Disney World memories and their connections to the parks we know and love today. I'm one of your hosts, Dewey. With me today are my podcast travel buddies, Ron and Tony. What's going on, Ron?
Hey, it's good to be here again. Having so much fun just talking Disney with you guys, and hope all our listeners are enjoying it as much as we are.
At least half as much as us, right?
Yeah, exactly.
At least half. Yeah. All right. Awesome, Ron. Good to have you here, buddy. How about you, Tony? What's going on today?
I'm doing pretty good today, Dewey, and I'm grateful that we have listeners and people who are watching our videos, and I hope they continue to do so.
We do definitely want to thank you, the listener or the viewer, if you're watching us on YouTube. Thanks for being here. We're having a ton of fun, and as we begin to interact with you guys, it makes it even better. So we appreciate y'all coming around and listening and watching. Today, we're going to continue with our favorite Disney attraction series. In week one, we visited vintage Epcot Center and visited my favorite attraction of all time, the now extinct World of Motion. Last week, we took a ride with Ron in his all-time favorite attraction, Mission Space, also at Epcot Center. This week, we're going to experience Tony's favorite attraction of all time, the original Star Tours. So we're going to be jumping out of Epcot Center finally and headed over to the MGM Studios, the Disney MGM Studios from way back when, opening in 1989. And Tony is going to take us on some of his first memories of Star Tours and give us all the details. So Tony, it's all yours, buddy. Take it away.
All righty. So, picking my favorite ride in all of Walt Disney World wasn't as easy as it sounds, because even though I have specific favorites in each of the parks, I have things that I could say that I love about rides in the Magic Kingdom, like Pirates of the Caribbean or Spaceship Earth at Epcot. But ultimately, I chose my favorite based on the amount of times that I've ridden on it over the years, how much of a must-do attraction it was for me every time I went on a Disney trip, and also how much enjoyment it brought me. And for those of you who have been following us for the past couple of weeks, I think you know that my favorite attraction of all time has to be the original Star Tours. And today I'm here to tell you about it.
First, a little bit of backstory to the ride. Star Tours was inspired by George Lucas's Star Wars movies, which at the time the ride was created were the most popular movies of all time. As a side note, if you'd like to hear the story of how I came to know and love Star Wars in the 1970s, I created and hosted a 3-part documentary on my personal YouTube channel, which I'll give you a history about how important the original trilogy was to me and to the members of my generation. I'll provide a link to that show at the end of today's program or in the comments section below. Star Tours the ride actually didn't start out being about Star Wars. Disney was seeking a way to bring modern-day movie elements into its theme parks in order to attract a larger audience. They were initially building a ride around their Star Wars ripoff movie from 1979 called The Black Hole. Due to the financial and critical failure of that movie, Imagineer Tony Baxter came up with the idea to enlist George Lucas, who had been working with Disney at the time on Captain EO. Disney obtained approval from George Lucas to create a theme park attraction, the first of its kind, and the first intellectual property not owned by Disney to gain a presence in the park. The initial ideas that were mulled around by Baxter and Imagineer Tom Fitzgerald and Lucas's own Industrial Light and Magic team, led by Dennis Muren, were going to be more roller coaster based. There was going to be a choose your own ending finale, and that idea was abandoned when George Lucas had spotted some artwork pertaining to a motion simulator ride that Disney had been proposing in France or in Europe. So now, instead of just feeling the thrill of riding yet another roller coaster, the idea was to take patrons literally into the worlds of Star Wars movies by syncing newly created footage and wrapping it around a high-speed intergalactic adventure that would give the audience the sensation that they had traveled to that galaxy far, far away. Star Tours opened first in Disneyland in California on January 9th, 1987. It featured the appearances of the original trilogy Star Wars characters as they danced their way through an interpretation of the movies, leading the way for George Lucas and Michael Eisner to cut the opening day ribbon with a special effects laser.
Hey, it's awesome stuff so far, Tony. I just wanted to pipe in. I recently watched a video of that opening ceremony where they use that laser.
Yeah.
And I've seen it a few times. Every time I see it, I want to bang my head against the wall because Michael Eisner says CP30 or something. Like he missed. It's like, come on, Michael.
How about you, please? CP30. Yes, Master Michael. Thank you.
Yeah. Come on, Michael. You got to at least get the names right.
And the bad part is he's standing right there.
Yeah, it's almost like 3PO's like, really? It's hilarious. So I just wanted to say that it makes me laugh and it makes me cringe all at the same time. I'm like, Michael Eisner is opening a Star Wars ride and doesn't even know the name of the characters. You're killing me.
That was his John Travolta moment when he screwed up that name that one time. And
awesome stuff.
For the people who don't know, actually, that is Anthony Daniels inside of that C-3PO outfit. He talks about that event in his recently released biography.
The ride finally made its way over to Walt Disney World on December 15th, 1989, after opening in Tokyo Disneyland earlier that year. And it became one of the prime attractions featured at Disney's, new to the time, Disney's MGM Studios theme park in Orlando. Although the original attraction in Disneyland was centered around a space theme since it was in Tomorrowland and featured a full-size X-Wing fighter in the waiting area, the Disney World attraction, in keeping with the studio's idea, featured a full-size replica of a AT-AT Walker in the midst of its attack on the Ewok planet of Endor, as seen in the 1983 movie Return of the Jedi. The forest line scene was posed just outside of a studio-looking building, for at the time, Disney MGM Studios saw itself as a working TV and movie studio. Once you got in the queue area for the ride and would look up at the mechanical monster from behind, you became aware that it was a set piece. It was flat on the backside, just a huge, menacing prop. Once you made your way past the gigantic prop piece and through the fake forest trees, you were in for an out-of-this-world adventure. The thrills began immediately upon entering the Endor bunker. The echoes of a tourist TV channel surround your senses, and you're met with a line of screens offering voyages to various exotic locations around the galaxy. We quickly learned that Star Tours is a sort of a space travel agency, promising exciting trips to planets that were well known by Star Wars fans at the time, such as Tatooine and Hoth and Endor, the site of the climactic battle in Return of the Jedi, and home of the spear-wielding teddy bears known as Ewoks. As you neared the end of the queue, you beheld one of the great wonders of the early days of MGM Studios, and that was the live appearance of C-3PO and R2-D2, the lovable robots who were brought mechanically to life and magically to life in front of you, berating each other as they had in the films. These animatronic figures were actually robots of, well, robots, and their movements were closely matched to their appearance in the film.
R2-D2, just what do you think you're doing? Get back to work before they deactivate you.
In fact, in Anthony Daniels' recently released biography, he details how he sat by the Imagineers as they created C-3PO to ensure that his movements were accurate. C-3PO, who is voiced by Anthony Daniels, who also portrayed him in all of the Star Wars movies from 1977 to present day, introduces us to the Starspeeder 3000, one of the most, quote, reliable transport ever, with the ability to hit high speeds of nearly 1 billion light years. But as 3PO relates to R2,
if this transport is the best, then why are we always repairing it?
As we pass 3PO and R2, we're led into a maintenance area where dozens of other droids, sometimes addressing the audience, sometimes experiencing planned breakdowns, and sometimes they were just there to look amazing. As we made our way into the following room, the anticipation grew even further. You could smell the hydraulics and feel the air conditioning that wafts in from the ride terminal, an impressively convincing hallway that gives one the sensation that they are indeed preparing to take a ride into space. As you are assigned a spot online to wait in front of a set of hydraulic doors,
You're given flight crew instructions by an intergalactic flight instructor
who reminds you to store your carry-on, not to take flash photos, and not to smoke while on board.
Upon hearing these chimes,
Star Tours was ready to take you on an exciting trip to the moons of Endor. As the doors slide open and you hear the rush of John Williams' famous score, you realize you are trapped inside a capsule. You also are introduced first on screen, then later in front of you, to a small mechanical RX-24 droid known as Captain Rex, who we learn who was about to make his very first trip into space along with us. The window shields open up in front of us, and Rex is indeed in the cockpit, an animatronic creation that was voiced by Paul Rubin, better known as Pee Wee Herman. Rex starts to take off too soon and goes the wrong way, as the riders immediately feel the capsule rumble as it lurches to and fro throughout the docking bay, instantly providing the sensation of falling to a chasm as Rex clumsily leads the ship through a docking bay out into space, stating, "I meant to do that." The sound of John Williams' score blasts and accompanies the rough and tumble journey as it makes its way into hyperspace, entirely missing the Endor moon we meant to visit, and instead crashing head-on into a comet. The crash causes unbelievable turbulence as the ship rattles and shakes its way through a gigantic crystal, only to be met by the pull of a tractor beam being emitted by a nearby Star Destroyer. Narrowly escaping the pull, we realize we are in the midst of a great space battle, presumably the one from Return of the Jedi, as we're met with confused images of rebel pilots on the view screen who ask what we're doing there. There seems to be a big battle going on. We're then thrown right into the heat of this Star War, as we find ourselves literally in the midst of the well-known TIE Fighter battle scene from the original Star Wars movie. And then we're inexplicably facing a Death Star, as we ride through the trenches in a scene recreated exactly from the movie by ILM. Only this time, we feel each bump, lurch, crash, dip, and blast. This is the moment that many Star Wars fans have dreamed about since the original film, to be able to see and experience the Death Star trench firsthand and witness the destruction of the ultimate weapon. We do that just in time to go into hyperspace and head back to the base we started at, except this time, we may not make it. Rex's horrible flying skills are leading us toward a terrible full-speed collision with a space freighter, which fortunately zips right out of the way just in time for the Starspeeder 3000 to come in for a safe, hard landing, much to the dismay of the flight crew seeing through the windows.
What's my first flight, and I'm still getting used to my programming? Hey!
Throughout this turbulent journey, I rarely wrote it without hearing audible gasps of delight and horror and thrill from the audience around me. And quite often the ride would end with a round of applause, and everybody would have the immediate need to just rush right out and go back on again, as I did a couple of times. That is, if your stomach could take it. It's not for the weak stomach or the weak-hearted, because the ride itself is very jumpy and bumpy and pretty turbulent. And upon exiting the attraction, similar to what Dewey was speaking about with World of Motion, you are led into another of Disney's infamous tourist shops, albeit this one was designed to resemble something from the Star Wars galaxy you just experienced. In the early years of the attraction, there was a caged Darth Vader and a stormtrooper mannequin that would leer at you menacingly when you got to the end of the corridor, just as you were about to make the turn into the store itself. They looked like they were captured and stuffed and put there in presentation, so maybe that's why they got rid of them. But this area has changed a lot over the years, and the store itself changed. It started life as something called Endor Vendors, and in keeping the theme with the forest moon motif, and it sold a whole lot of wonderful souvenirs related to the ride, as well as Star Wars toys and clothes and knickknacks. And I don't know if I should share it here. You guys can tell me. Dewey, you've seen it. I once got, during my first ride there back in 1991, I bought this very colorful, puffy painted shirt that says Star Tours on it. And I look at it and wonder what I was thinking about when I bought that thing. It's really kind of disgusting to look at. But at the time, it was like, wow, Star Tours is written on something. I've got to wear that. It looks exotic and weird.
They had a lot of different, I guess you could say the stuff with the Star Tours logo and stuff on it. And I mean, it's not your fault, Tony. Those puffy shirts were a thing in the 90s. It's not your fault. That was popular. But yeah, I mean, Star Tours had, if you think about it, in the 70s and 80s, Star Wars merchandise was everywhere.
It was.
And then when they stopped making the movies after 1983, it was hard to find Star Wars merchandise.
Definitely was.
And I know you're a big Star Wars super fan. I'm the same way. So that span between, say, 83, I guess 85 is when they kind of stopped making the figures and things like that. So between 85 and, like you're saying, 91, when you started writing the attraction and stuff, you really couldn't find Star Wars merchandise. So to walk into indoor vendors at that time and find something with Darth Vader or Star Tours or whatever, as a Star Wars super fan, you were just in heaven. It was like, oh my gosh, I could buy Star Wars stuff. And they had, Indoor Vendors is a pretty good sized store, and they had Star Tours plastered on anything you could think of, to include puffy shirts.
Mm-hmm. Well, what today's kids might not be aware of the fact that geek culture was not really a thing back then. You didn't go around wearing your favorite Disney shirt or your favorite Star Wars shirt in public. It was something that was you would have to go to a niche shop somewhere and maybe find a shirt that said that on it. So to be faced with something in a store like that was just great.
It is interesting to me the type of souvenirs that amusement parks offer. I've got several that I thought were like you. Oh, I have to have that, and then bring it home, and you're like, "What was I thinking?"
Exactly.
Well, it was just, like I said, it was so cool. And like to be able to buy Star Wars stuff, because, nowadays you can go into Kohl's and buy Star Wars. You can every store. I mean, Bed Bath and Beyond has Star Wars stuff for your bathroom. You could buy Star Wars anything. In the late 80s. Yeah, a soap dispenser. Absolutely. The late 80s, you couldn't do that. And to further your point, Tony, I always say, I was a Star Wars geek before Star Wars geeks were cool.
That's right.
It was almost like you would maybe kind of get made fun of or something if you were wearing a Star Wars shirt or something, because it really wasn't, cool then. And it's obviously that
geek was not cool.
Right.
Yeah.
Being a geek or being a nerd was not cool. It's very cool now. It's acceptable and even admired.
Which works well for me, because I'm an old school Star Wars geek. So that's a really good point, Tony. That's good stuff. And your puffy Star Tours shirt may have had you targeted for getting picked on at that time, right?
Well, it was thankfully I wasn't picked on, but it was between that and the whatever the fanny pack that I was wearing at the time too.
They're trying to make a comeback too.
At the time, I was convinced by a lady friend that I had that it would look great and you'd be able to carry all your stuff in it, which actually it did. I was able to put my glasses and my wallet all in there and not worry about it during the ride. But when I look at the pictures now, I'm like, what was I thinking? What was I doing?
Tony, there's no denying that a fanny pack is utilitarian.
Absolutely.
That it is useful. Now, if photographs of having worn a fanny pack still exist, those photographs may not age well, but it was a handy device. You certainly could make good use of it.
Well, and speaking about how geekdom was not really accepted, believe it or not, I had incidents like that in Disney World. There was one time that I had gone there for what I was going to talk about it later, but Star Wars weekends. And I went to go buy my ticket, and the ticket counter lady said to me, "Are you sure you want to go into the park today? There's going to be a lot of Star Wars people around." And I'm thinking, yeah, that's why I'm here.
And you're like, hey, lady, I am Star Wars.
That's
people.
right. That's right. And another time I walked through the park, this was back in 2007. I had a shirt that had all of the characters on it on my back. And on the front, it said it was from Celebration. At the back of it said Star Wars is forever. And this is back before Disney owned Star Wars. And the only connection here was Star Tours, I suppose. But I wore that one day to the Magic Kingdom. And I was getting all of these weird looks from people with goofy hats and other weird looking things. Like, what are you looking at me weird for? Star Wars? Why are you wearing Star Wars? So it was kind of odd. But believe it or not, even this goes even as far as last year when I went to Galaxy's Edge. As I was just kind of like this, I was kind of bounding for the area, and as I'm exiting the Galaxy's Edge area, heading into the rest of MGM of Hollywood Studios. I'm still used to calling it MGM Studios. I don't know if I'm ever going to be able to call it anything other than that. But
I do the same thing, Tony. I say MGM. Even, like when we're there, I'll say MGM, and I'm like, I mean the studios.
Exactly. but as I was leaving Galaxy's Edge, I overheard some guy walking around saying to somebody on the phone, I don't know, there's so many Star Wars freaks around. Okay, all right, dude. I'm one. I've got my card in my pocket, no less, but I'm a card carrying Star Wars geek. But anyway, the Endor of Endors was refurbished in 1999 during the release of the first Star Wars prequel, the Phantom Menace, and it was renamed Tatooine Traders, and it was given this new outlook that looks like something from the planet Tatooine, kind of an early precursor to what they would eventually do in Galaxy's Edge with Batuu. But it was more of an exotic look to the area and a nice little expansion. In 1997, in order to honor the 20th anniversary of the original Star Wars movie release, Disney began hosting a festival, which was known as Star Wars Weekends. Beginning in 2000, it became more of an annual event that featured in-person appearances by some of our favorite actors from the films, including people like Mark Hamill and Carrie Fisher and David Prowse and Billy D. Williams and Anthony Daniels. And even later, as it went on, stars from the prequels and from the Clone Wars television series. And actually, as a side note, if you'd like to see some videos that I shot during my visit to the Star Wars Weekends, including rare footage of people like Jake Lloyd and David Prowse, you can also head on over to my personal website, or I'll share some of those here as well, because they're Disney related, and I think you might be interested in seeing some of that stuff. And as another side note, Dewey once contacted me from Star Wars Weekends Live. I was working on another podcast, and he did a remote in call live from Star Tours Weekends, which I also might share here as well, unless we do another show specifically about Star Wars Weekends.
I remember when you guys did that. That was pretty cool.
Yeah.
It has to be, I mean, gosh, you figure
2006 or 2007, maybe.
Probably so. It's at least 10 years ago, maybe more. But it was, I was down there for a trip, and you were working on I don't know if you were working on a documentary, one of your documentaries.
No, it was a Star Wars related podcast.
Your podcast. Yeah. And, you and I had known each other from the Disney board. So you reached out to me and said, would you want to, I know you're down there, would you like to do a little interview, right from Star Wars Celebration? And, of course I jumped on it because that's super cool. But yes, absolutely. I think Star Wars Weekends is probably big enough and cool enough that we should probably do an episode all about Star Wars Weekends at some point, because I know I've attended Star Wars Weekends probably 5 or 6 times or so. I don't know if you guys can see it. It's got to be 10, 12, 15 years ago.
I think I'm not sure. It must have been 15 years ago, because it was I think it was that 2006 trip. But, you just reminded me by saying that one of the best things for me during that period was being able to go to the park during those weekends and see how many people were interested in what was my favorite movie. It was you don't really get that interaction, just like we're doing this show about Disney amongst each other. You didn't really get that interaction with people who were as interested in Star Wars at the time. So it was fun to get this gathering where everybody there was into this and having such a great time. And I also have a lot of fond memories of bringing people onto Star Tours, the ride itself. The reason I mentioned Star Wars weekends as a side note is that a lot of the attractions that took place for Star Wars weekends, including Jedi training for the young kids, which eventually became an actual thing in the parks, and the dance and the celebrity meetups were all held right underneath the AT&T. And another good thing is, because we're talking about the modern 2000 era, I actually have video footage of this, which I can share as I'm speaking, so you can actually see what it is I'm talking about. But one of the reasons that this ride is my favorite is that I just love the imagination of the queue. The use of the John Williams music in the area as you're waiting adds to the sensation that you're heading into Star Wars. Seeing the characters, running into them, interacting with them to some extent, being able to see the robots in person interacting with each other. That's just, for me, I sometimes I would, at the end of a day at Epcot Center, I would ask, I'm sorry, not Epcot, at the end of the day at MGM, I would ask the cast member if I could just walk in real quickly, because usually toward the end of the day, Star Tours is kind of empty. You can go on a few different times if you want to. So I would ask, can I just go in and take a look? And I just would walk in and just stand there and watch the robots interact for a little bit, because it was surreal to me. I mean, as you can tell, C-3PO has always been my favorite character, and seeing him there live was amazing. And at one point, there were also some actual prop ships from the movies that were set out in front of the studio set alongside the Imperial Walkers. I believe it was the Snow Speeder and one of Jabba's skiffs were set out right in front there. And one of the interesting things that I found when I was doing some research on this and looking through my old photos, during my first visit, my nephew actually got to meet with Chewbacca. I didn't even remember that Chewbacca was even there way back then, but there he is walking around, and the Ewoks also would make appearances from time to time, sometimes inside the ride in the waiting area as you were standing in the queue. It was convincing. Star Tours was convincing, fun, funny, and most of all, it enabled me to experience my favorite movies in a unique way. And as I reported in another episode, I enjoyed this ride so much that when it was refurbished and changed into the current incarnation, which is Star Tours: The Adventures Continue, back in, was it 2011 or 2012? I used up a $90 park ticket just to be able to ride it 2 hours before the park closed. I went on it about 3 or 4 times. And I do enjoy the new version, but I haven't ridden it enough to give a formal review on it. So maybe we'll revisit that in a future show. But that is my Star Tours story and why it is my favorite ride.
That's fantastic, Tony. I knew you being a gigantic Star Wars fan, and I share that love. I knew this was going to be a super fun episode. So, Ron, I know you're a fan. You're not as big, like, put on the Star Wars costumes and dress up and walk around the place fan like we are. Right. But what are your?
I'm not a super fan like you guys. When I was a kid, I even had pillowcases and sheets that were Star Wars. So it's a dear place for me, but it's not something I continue to collect. But anytime there's an opportunity to watch it, I won't turn it down. And the interesting thing that if you guys haven't watched the series, and I think you guys have, but
yes,
the series on Disney Plus that gives the backstory of some of the attractions is so interesting. And they did one on Star Tours, and but it was very interesting to me that they reminded me that video was not, developed yet. It was all film.
Oh, right. Yeah. The original Star Tours was on a film loop.
Right. And that it wasn't just digital where you just plug it in and go. They had to develop a whole way of making this loop because you didn't want to take the time to rewind the film. So they did a loop where it just plays continuously. And so what I find interesting, though, is then that's true for all the rides on my first trip in 1976. Those were film, not video. So they were doing the same similar technology build. It just, again, reminded me how advanced Disney is in their development of what they do. And Star Tours is a perfect example of that.
This is one of my all-time favorite movie franchises, all-time favorite rides. So I do have a few notes. I told you guys my first trip was in 1985. We went again in 1987. And then the next time we went, my third trip, we went in 1989. And the reason we made sure we went in 1989 was because that is the year that the Disney MGM Studios opened. So we were super excited to attend a new park. And, you know, it opened in, I think it was May of 89. And we went in summer, probably June of 89. So that's typically when we took our trips back then because, you know, school and stuff. So in 1989, our first trip there, we were really excited, like I said. And I can remember, you know, you come down the main street there and you now again, remember 1989, there was no internet. So it's not like I could go on the internet and find out opening day or anything like that. So I remember coming down that main strip and looking to the left and you can see the building and it's got, you know, like Tony said, the gigantic AT-AT is standing out there in front of the show building. And there's a huge mural of I guess you could call it the movie poster of the attraction. And I saw that and I freaked out. I was like, oh my gosh, Star Wars ride. You know, I was so excited. So we, you know, immediately start hanging out or heading that way. And as I get closer, you know, in my head, I'm not really putting two and two together yet, but I'm noticing that that's weird. How come there's not a line? How come nobody's trying to get into Star Tours? I'm going to be the first one. And then it's almost like that Clark Griswold thing. You get up to the moose and it says, sorry, folks. So I get up there closer to Star Tours and, you know, the sign says opening 1990. And I was like, but it's 1989. It can't open in 1990. So I was devastated that Star Tours was not open yet. So, you know, I spent, I don't know how long I spent just standing there, you know, looking up at the AT-AT, and I probably had tears running down my face. It was like, I want to ride Star Tours, you know, but it was 1989. It wasn't open yet. But I can remember just how devastated I was that it wasn't 1990 and the sign was telling me that, you know, you're not riding it today. So finally we came back for another trip, and I'm still going through all pictures and stuff. I'm not sure if it was 1990 or 1991 was my next trip. Still trying to figure that out. I'm actually in the process of trying to make a list of all of my trips. So I know it was somewhere between 90 and 91. So, but when we did go back, I finally was able to ride the attraction. I was able to, you know, walk through the doors, walk beneath the AT-AT. And the first thing you see up top when you walk through that opening is a couple of the Mon Calamari, you know, the Admiral Akbar species. Mm-hmm. And, you know, they're up there like in the viewport and you can see them, they're moving around doing their Star Wars stuff. And, you know, it just blew me away. I was like, oh my gosh, there's Admiral Akbar, you know, super cool. And then you walk around and that room opens and there's a full scale speeder. And I know, Tony, you said it's the Star Speeder 3000. That's what it was called for the original attraction. And R2 is in the port, the astromech droid port, and he's bouncing up and down and, you know, his head spinning and stuff. And 3PO's standing there at this computer panel. And, you know, he's moving in his Anthony Daniels kind of way and everything. And I was just blown away. I mean, right there in front of me, almost close enough to touch, is R2-D2 and C-3PO.
Yes.
And just absolutely amazing. And I can remember, and now as excited as I was to ride that ride, I can remember standing there at the rail and saying, you can go ahead and go. You can go ahead and go. You can go ahead and go. And letting people go by me because I was just watching 3PO and, you know, he would do.
It was a lot of fun to watch. Yeah, like I said,
I
would come in at the end of the day, just look at them.
Yes, I don't know, have any idea how long I stood there and watched that 3PO and R2 interaction, but I remember letting people go, and because I'm not leaving yet, I'm still watching this. Y'all go ahead and y'all can go, and just super cool. And gosh, it was just amazing to be in the same room with Star Wars characters. So cool.
I was just going to say, eventually Disney found a way to incorporate their own Fab Five into this by creating Jedi Mickey, who's represented back here. And I believe they did a couple of the others. I don't think I visited the parks when they did any of the others. there's 2004's Jedi Mickey stuff plush there.
Pretty sure that was a gift from you, Tony, wasn't
That's
it?
right.
Didn't you
yes.
send me that?
Yes.
Yes.
They did, yeah.
So that's for. So
wait a second. Dewey got a Star Wars gift and I didn't get a Star Wars gift.
I can tell you, first of all, I'm cooler than you. But second of all, Tony actually sent that to me. I was deployed overseas.
Oh, wow.
I was still in the Air Force back then, and I was deployed overseas. He actually sent that to me. I'm not going to either confirm or deny that I slept with Jedi Mickey at nighttime. That is neither confirmed nor denied, but that's why Tony sent that to me.
That's a nice gesture. That's awesome.
Don't get your feelings hurt, Ron. It was Tony was trying to make me feel better for being deployed overseas. So eventually I did actually tear myself away from the C-3PO animatronic and made it onto the ride. And for the ride itself, for late 80s, early 90s technology, it was cutting edge, like just could not be matched anywhere else. And to be inside the simulator, inside that speeder, and then, really immersed into Star Wars. Star Wars has a look to it, the way that the technology from Star Wars looks. It's supposed to be space technology, but it's also supposed to be in a galaxy far, far away that was a long time ago. So it's supposed to look old and used. And that's how Star Wars looks. And this ride, this attraction vehicle looks like that. When you sit down in it, you're in Star Wars. It's unmistakable. The view screen, it opens up and you see Rex there, and you see it's like,
I remember the first time that when the view screen opened, I kept thinking to myself, is he really there, or is he just another projection? And
he wasn't. It was an animatronic.
He was really there.
Yeah, super cool. Everything blew you away. So absolutely,
it was a use of all the different Disney technologies that they had at the time,
absolutely
creating a visual cue that was pleasing for people to wait in, as well as using the animatronics, using the movies, using the new technology, using a little bit of everything that they had, and the music. It was
really the precursor to what we see now in Galaxy's Edge, where you're not riding an attraction, you are immersed into that world, where you're no longer in Florida, you're no longer in a theme park, you are in a galaxy far, far away. And they really killed it. The ride was amazing. So then you get off the ride, and I like how you definitely described the indoor vendors. You come down the ramp, and when you come around the corner, you see Darth Vader behind that cage. And you guys know that I'm a member of the 501st and everything. So now, I'm friends with people that have Darth Vader costumes. I see them all the time. But in 1990 or 91, the 501st wasn't really a thing. So, and you didn't see costumes in person, like you couldn't just walk up and see Darth Vader or 3PO or stormtroopers or whatever. So to come down that ramp as you're getting out of Star Tours and coming into indoor vendors, and you see Darth Vader there, a life-size, costume standing there again, almost like I stood there looking at 3PO. I remember, I think I had my fingers in the cage, and I was like, oh my gosh, it's Darth Vader. I was freaking out.
I'm trying to remember, did they also have a breathing effect going on in there?
It did. Unfortunately, like some other things in Disney that is come and gone, at some point the breathing stopped and they just didn't bother to fix it. It's almost like the Yeti in Expedition Everest. They're like, it's really cool, it moves. Oh wait, it's broken, so we'll just do a strobe light now. It kind of the same thing. Vader did have that breathing, and I mean it was a little intimidating, it was really loud and it would breathe, and as you got closer it was like, oh my gosh, Darth Vader is breathing at me. Super cool. So again, really cool that you could find the Star Tours logo and everything, because Star Wars nerds like me, yeah, there you go. They see the Star Tours logo right there.
My wife actually got me this bank, which I started to save what I was going to go on my next Disney trip in there.
You can't fit enough coins in that thing to avoid a Disney
try.
trip.
Well, get a souvenir or something.
Even if
gold coins, maybe.
Yeah, gold coins.
Even if you're saving the dollar coins in that thing, you're not going to save a Disney trip in that. But lots of cool stuff. Absolutely love that. Love that store.
Dude, let me ask you a quick question. Since you had gone there before it opened, and I've been trying to remember this, and even though I went on the ride countless times, I don't remember specifically. But looking at my photos, I was wondering about this. The AT-AT in front, the Imperial Walker, it didn't always shoot smoke out of its nozzle, did it? When I went my first time, it didn't do anything. It was a static display. I'm looking at my photo. It looks like it's just a red light that's on there, the original time I went.
At some point, and I don't know when, and I don't know when it stopped, but at some point it would light up and the sound effects would do the AT-AT sound device, choo, 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 how, because those jaw blasters move in the movies like this. So they would emit some sort of smoke, yeah. And it would choo, 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 and they would light up. It didn't do that my first time because, they were still building the attraction, and it did eventually do that. And it now has kind of like the Darth Vader breathing in the corner, it stopped making those effects, and Disney never fixed it. But you are correct. It did do that and did smoke and all that kind of stuff.
Another weird thing that memory does to you is that I actually, because it's been a while since I've been able to go to the parks, I mentioned that, but my wife and I were were discussing the ride, and we couldn't remember whether it had been 3D all the time. She was insisting, oh yeah, I always went on there with 3D. I said, no, 3D was only added after the Adventures Continue. It was not 3D before that.
That's correct. I agree. That's correct. And great segue, Tony. I was going to roll into the Adventures Continue because, the original idea is that, and even George Lucas talks about it in interviews, the original idea is that they were going to update it and add new film or add new scenes or something every couple of years. And as we know, it debuted in Disneyland in 87, in 1990, or the end of 89 in MGM Studios. And it ran for 20 years and they never updated anything. So when the Adventures Continue did come, they went all out and they added the 3D, and they added where it's in 3 segments. So you get like an opening segment, you get the middle segment where one of the characters, either Princess Leia or Yoda or BB-8 or somebody, comes in and says, you're selected for this mission. And then the third segment is where you end up going. And so now there's countless possibilities of the adventure that you can take. And that is super cool. Again, almost a throwback to that Horizons back in the day at the end, where you could pick the ending. You had 3 choices. Now the Star Tours, the Adventures Continue, has again, I don't math, so I don't know how many possibilities there are.
I think they stated it was 54.
And that's a lot. I mean, dozens of possibilities, and sometimes you might get the same one, sometimes you don't. I'll tell you, my wife actually asked me to mention that when we were talking about, I was writing these notes for this episode. She said, yeah, I know that there's a lot of possibilities, but just make sure you mention that I get the same one every single time. And I was like, so in normal trips, the family will ride it twice maybe, but me being the Star Wars fanatic that I am, I'll usually jump on it 5 or 6 times during a trip. So I've seen a bunch of those different variations, but she swears she gets Hoth every single time. So She wanted me to make sure that I mentioned that. So that was
is
pretty
funny. And when you do want to get the same combination, you don't. I had seen the one that I did last year. There was actually a scene in The Rise of Skywalker, the very last Star Wars Disney film. It took us into the midst of that battle, and I wanted my wife to see that, but it took us a totally different way.
And that's what's cool because of this. Ron, you alluded to it earlier. In the original, it was that looped film and, like miles of film. So that is a gigantic undertaking to add or subtract film from that. So that's why it never got updated. Not to mention it was all of the physical sets and models and stuff is how they made that on actual film. Now with the the introduction of all of the digital elements and everything, they can add and subtract, like a snap of the finger. So it's no problem to add something. So as the sequel trilogy has come online starting back in 2015 with The Force Awakens, they added a little bit. They added Poe and Finn, and General Hux is in one of them, and they added a few scenes from that movie. And then a couple of years later, they added a little bit from The Last Jedi. And a couple of years later, they added a little bit from The Rise of Skywalker.
And they continued Batuu as well. They've added
absolutely
a trip through Batuu.
I remember I heard, probably read online somewhere, that there was going to be like a sneak peek into Galaxy's Edge in one of the closing scenes that you can now see on Star Tours The Adventures Continue. So yeah. My son and I, we made it our goal that trip, and we were going to ride it until we saw Batuu. And we got it on like the second or third time. So I'm pretty sure Disney tweaks just a little bit and maybe takes away a little bit of that randomization to make sure that the new stuff is seen a little bit more than all other things. Because it didn't take us very many trips to see that new Batuu scene, but I can remember that 3PO lands the speeder and it's on Batuu, and you can see one of the assassin droids, which we know is either IG-88 or, if you're a Mandalorian fan, IG-11. There's one of those assassin droids standing there and outside of your speeder. So we were really excited to see that addition of Batuu and what was coming from Galaxy's Edge.
Well, so speaking of which, cool. you just reminded me that one of the cool things about The Adventures Continue is that my droid gets a starring role in that one. In when the ride was upgraded, C-3PO went from just being in the front to actually being your pilot in this one, your harried, nervous pilot, in an animatronic that's right in front of you, doing things, basically doing this. But still, it was so cool to have him along for the ride with you.
But, he does that classic 3PO hands up, he's like that surprise. And so, he's your accidental pilot. He's not supposed to be your pilot. So, yes, that's another really cool thing that they did to give you more face time with a classic character. So super cool. Absolutely love the ride. Tony, you mentioned that when they released the prequels and they returned to the planet of Tatooine, they changed indoor vendors to Tatooine traders. I'll tell you that I was not a fan of that. While it is really well themed, it does look like Tatooine. If you remember in the prequels, in the Phantom Menace, where it's almost like stone hut apartment buildings where Anakin and his mom lived. It looks like that. It's really well done, but it always bothered me that you've got the forest of Endor touching Tatooine, and I'm like, come on, guys.
Yeah, that didn't make much sense.
Leave it indoor. You've got indoor trees and then Tatooine buildings. While it was well done, I enjoyed indoor vendors more than I did, enjoy the name of Tatooine Traders. Tony, this is your show. This is your favorite attraction this week. So any closing statements, anything you want to end this segment with about Star Tours?
Well, I just want to say that I am happy that I had the opportunity to visit it when it was the original show, and I'm glad that I've had some chances to see it as the new thing, and I can't wait to someday go back and try out some more of those 54 variations. I'm looking forward to that.
Absolutely. That's good stuff. It is really cool that they managed to keep it. They don't always do that. I'm always on board when they want to add a new attraction, but I wish they would just add a new attraction instead of removing one and replacing it. You know, last week we talked about Ron's favorite was Mission Space. Great ride. Mission Space is fantastic. They should have added it to Epcot Center instead of removing Horizons and adding Mission Space. So Tony, for your favorite, thank goodness they just updated it. They just, right. I guess you could say, plussed it. You know, we still get to experience the 3PO animatronic, and that's super cool. I'm very thankful that they didn't just axe that attraction and, you know, make it another opportunity to see Anna and Elsa. You know, I mean, it seems like everything is Anna and Elsa now. So,
well, I'm sure.
I'm surprised it's not Olaf driving the Star Speeder, but you know, I'm glad we still have Star Tours there. So, great job, Tony. I really enjoyed your synopsis there. You're leading us through.
If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Listen to the complete show on your favorite podcast streamer. Follow us on social media at WDW Reflections Podcast. See you real soon. And click here to see some more of our content.